events went differently? What if Green Goblin had the symbiote in Spider-Man 2002? What if the symbiote had landed early in the Raimi verse timeline, making its way to Norman Osborn? In today's Marvel's What If, I will be exploring this cool concept where the symbiote lands early. I believe if the symbiote had been in the first Spider-Man film, it would have been dire consequences for Peter Parker and Spider-Man. The amount of damage it would do not only with the Goblin serum, but now throwing the symbiote into the mix of things. This just got crazier. That being said, let's dive right into this Marvel's What If, and make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn your notifications on so you don't miss a fan fiction on this channel. I could start off our story anywhere in the Spider-Man timeline, from the beginning, middle, or end. Still, I think what would make this a fascinating Marvel's What If is that it is a branched timeline, and where it begins around the middle of the film. Parker has already been built up to being Spider-Man, Green Goblin has attacked the Expo, and Spider-Man and Green Goblin fought it out the same, just like the original Raimiverse timeline, but this time, Spider-Man dodges an attack from Green Goblin, ripping parts of the glider out. He damages the glider badly. Spider-Man looks from afar. He could go after the Green Goblin for attacking and destroying the Expo, but looks to see MJ about to fall. Peter decides that he needs to save Mary Jane. In a last-ditch effort, Parker would protect her, bringing her to safety, but this is where things take a dark, twisted turn. Spider-Man has defeated Green Goblin. Norman Osborn was drinking in the Osborn residence house. He wanted vengeance. Spider-Man made him weak by defeating him and doing it with ease. Norman started trying to take back control, asking the Goblin to leave him alone, but the Goblin's voice echoed, saying "coward." Norman was broken. Not only has he become this thing, but he also realized that he hurt his son Harry, who he could have killed in the process. Norman got off of his chair, walking into the shadows of his house. He turned his lights on to see a newspaper that said terror in Times Square. Norman's face slowly turned into a smirk, where he snapped back to reality and he saw that he murdered all of the board members that were a part of Oscorp. But then he remembered what they did to him during the board meetings. Norman wanted power and knew what he needed to do: remove those who were going to stand in the Goblin's way. But after a split second, Norman laughed, saying that maybe Spider-Man can join them. At the same time, an asteroid made an impact. Norman's laugh quickly vanished like it was never there. To catch up with what was going on, Norman started hearing people screaming. He ran to check what it was. Getting his broken glider and suit, Norman went off as Green Goblin to check the disturbance. His glider hovered over the crowd of people who were watching as a rock broke out of the black goo. The people screamed. Green Goblin started attacking the people, shoving them out of the way, until he saw what he has always dreamed of. It was as if fate brought him to ultimate power. Green Goblin was confused, but saw an alien-like substance. At first, Norman thought that he could get rich from it, Oscorp being the first to find aliens or sell alien weapons to the government to finally take down Quest Aerospace. The more Norman was becoming distracted, he got off of his glider, extending a hand out before the substance lunged at Green Goblin. Before Norman screamed and everything went dark. Norman woke up. He was hovering over a giant skyscraper not far from the Daily Bugle, but something was amiss. He looked at his hands, which were covered in black, and so was his glider. Goblin slowly looked up to see that his entire body was covered in whatever he saw back in that alleyway. He heard another voice in his head, saying, "We will show you what power truly is." The voice told Green Goblin, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Green Goblin laughed. His laugh was deeper. He saw as if claws started coming from his hands. Green Goblin's glider became bigger as the symbiote corrupted everything in it, making Norman stronger than ever before. Green Goblin looked into the reflection of the building where the Daily Bugle stuck out. The Goblin smiled. At the same time, Peter Parker was in a heated argument, explaining Spider-Man wasn't attacking the city, he was protecting the people people of New York, calling the Bugle out for slander before walking away. J. Jonah Jameson threw his cigar out of the window like nothing happened, but this time the symbiote surprised and attacked Jonah. Parker looked back knowing something was off, but because the symbiote blocks Peter's spider sense, he wasn't able to react quickly enough. Green Goblin flew from behind, picking up J. Jonah Jameson. Jonah begged for his life. Goblin told him that this time things were different and that the Green Goblin has evolved into a god. The hand of Green Goblin was gripping onto Jonah's neck, slowly turned into a rope where the symbiote latched on almost like a snake was constricting you. The amount of power he had was unbelievable. This scared Peter. He didn't know what happened to Green Goblin, but knew that he needed to step in before it was too late. The time was ticking. Parker tried to get the drop on him, but the symbiote sensed it. Spider-Man yelled, "Halloween came early," before a symbiote tendril from the Goblin's back launched at Spider-Man, slowly wrapping it around his arms before squeezing down. Parker tried to break free. He couldn't free himself. He was starting to lose consciousness. Norman told Spider-Man that he was useless before Green Goblin snapped J. Jonah Jameson's neck in front of everyone at the Bugle. Spider-Man yelled no, he was too late again. Peter tried to break free, and the amount of anger in him was coursing through his veins. Spider-Man yelled before ripping the symbiote in half. He spun a web at the Green Goblin before attaching to his mask. The symbiote absorbed the web before knocking out Spider-Man. Spider-Man fell down below from the Bugle before Goblin caught him like the original timeline. Green Goblin took out some pumpkin bombs before blowing up parts of the Daily Bugle. Everything was blurry. Spider-Man woke up to see nothing but a shadow. He turned his head and everything was dark, but only heard a voice. The Goblin was lurking in the shadows on his prey. Green Goblin told Spider-Man they were almost the same, before Spider-Man said that he was a murderer and he killed Jonah. Goblin said that he chose his path and Spider-Man chose the path to be a hero. The Goblin talked about how the city once loved Spider-Man, but the one thing people like seeing is to see the hero fail, fall, die trying, and now Spider-Man can show the city this. Or he can evolve, like what he did. Green Goblin told Spider-Man about this new godlike power. It can take anything it wants, and no one can stand in their way. Green Goblin asked why bother fighting, when Spider-Man said that it's right. Norman laughed and told Spider-Man the real truth, how there are only a few worthy people like themselves who could become larger than life. They could cause the deaths of millions again and again until they're both dead. He extended his hand out to Spider-Man, where Peter saw through his lenses the raw power of whatever was on the Green Goblin. The symbiote tendrils moved around off of Norman's hand, and Peter didn't take it. This caused Green Goblin to become angry. He thought he could put fear into Spider-Man by killing people at the Bugle, but it seems like this only caused him to hate him more. Green Goblin choked Spider-Man, lifting him in the air. The symbiote raised him by his legs. Peter tried to break free, and Goblin just laughed as he was choking him in the air. Green Goblin told Spider-Man this is what power feels like, before Spider-Man screamed, breaking free from the grip. The symbiote and the Goblin were shocked. Spider-Man punched the Goblin back. He smiled and Green Goblin said, "So be it," before his glider rushed in. He got on his glider and Spider-Man, with his two fists in the air, ready to fight, met a pumpkin bomb, where he got launched into the brick of a building rooftop. Falling to the ground, the Green Goblin got off of his glider before beating Spider-Man to a pulp. The symbiote grabbed him before ripping his mask off of him. Norman saw that it was Peter Parker. He immediately stopped fighting him. Norman came to his senses before he stopped fighting. Peter got back up, but Green Goblin was already gone. He saw that his mask has been removed. He started panicking and he realized that the Green Goblin knows who he is, and at any moment, his friends or family could be in danger. Peter would leave the scene going back home after a long day. He made it to his room and he wall crawled where he heard TV noises coming from Harry's room. Peter opened the door where the breaking news told the audience at home that the Daily Bugle has been destroyed, and they listen and they list off names who were killed. Eddie Brock, Robbie, J. Jonah Jameson, Betty Brant, and many more who were killed in the bombings, saying that someone must stop the Green Goblin. Parker was shocked to hear it. Harry asked how he got out of there so fast, and Peter was left silent. He shut the door to his room knowing that he failed, but Peter's night was just getting worse. After the exchange between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin like the original timeline, MJ walked home in the rain from work, where this time she was badly beaten and mugged. Without Spider-Man there to save her, she almost lost her life from the robbers who stole everything from her. Harry got a call from MJ's dad. Harry ran out of the door telling Peter what had happened. Peter felt bad and stared at the wall. He thought to himself maybe Norman was right about everything. He needed the power to save his friends, and what he had maybe he needed. Peter knew that it was wrong to think like that, but what if he had the Goblin's new powers to defeat him? Was it possible? All these questions went through Peter's head before he got a phone call. At the same time, Norman went back home debating on what he could do next. The Goblin told the symbiote that they needed to strike Spider-Man's heart, and the only way to do this was to kill his Aunt May, making him wish he were dead. The symbiote was consuming Norman even more, to the point where Norman wasn't even the same or could become normal ever again. He suited up, going to May's, where Green Goblin smashed through the glass. The symbiote told Norman to kill her. He didn't want to do it, but the symbiote took control, picking up May by the neck before blowing up the whole block. The police phoned Parker about the situation, where Parker ran out the door, swinging faster than ever before. He ran to the scene where he was already too late. Parker was horrified to see that his home was destroyed and it was burned to a crisp. The firemen put the fire out but found a body. The police told Peter that they were sorry to inform him that his Aunt May had been killed. This pushed Peter Parker over the edge. Not only has he lost Uncle Ben, the Daily Bugle, because of Spider-Man, but now his Aunt May was killed because of his recent actions for being a hero. This shattered Peter's mind and heart. He fell to the ground, crying. Parker cried as a shadow watched from a distance, laughing. Norman, alongside the symbiote, heard the news from Harry after Harry phoned his dad that MJ was in the hospital. Green Goblin visited the hospital to grab MJ. Parker ran into an alleyway near his home with tears streaming down his face. He put his mask on, knowing Green Goblin's next course of action was going to be killing Harry or MJ. If he could stop the Green Goblin now, he might be able to save one of them. As he went to the hospital, Parker crawled to see that no one was there. He was already too late. Earlier, Green Goblin attacked the hospital before not only grabbing Mary Jane, but also knocking out his son Harry Osborn, leaving a note for Peter to follow the blood. Before hearing people screaming for help, Peter's spider senses went off. Spider-Man swung to the top of the building, hearing police cars, before looking from afar to see Green Goblin terrorizing people, blowing up parts of the Queensburg Bridge. Spider-Man knew this was his final stand against the Green Goblin. He couldn't believe how far he went, but Parker swore that he would pay with his life for killing his Aunt May. Peter made his way to the bridge like the original timeline, but this time Green Goblin has become fully consumed by the symbiote. Holding his son Harry on the left side and MJ on the right side hostage, Green Goblin's mask started coming apart. Symbiote tendrils revealed to Spider-Man that it was Norman Osborn all along. Spider-Man couldn't believe it. He must have been seeing things, but it was true. Norman said, "No good deed goes unpunished." The symbiote reformed before Green Goblin laughed, saying that the heroes must choose the ultimate choice, but gods don't need to choose. All they need to do is take what they want. Because Spider-Man didn't want to become a god, now he will die like any other mortal. Symbiote Goblin threw Harry and MJ before, in the nick of time, Spider-Man grabbed them both. before Symbiote Goblin's glider smashed into Spider-Man. Norman jumped off of the bridge onto the glider. A close quarters combat fight began with Spider-Man throwing hits at Symbiote Goblin. Before he lost balance, the glider smashed into an old warehouse. The symbiote caught the fall, but Spider-Man was severely damaged, being thrown into glass and bricks. Before rolling, getting to his feet, he met with a symbiote knife. Symbiote Goblin tried to stab Peter, who dodged most of the attacks. Parker asked Norman why he did all of this, where Green Goblin told him that he likes being bad because it makes him happy. Parker screamed before he dodged a symbiote blade before kicking the symbiote goblin into a wall. Spider-Man used his webs to web up Norman's hands, but the symbiote got mad, creating a venomized face on the Green Goblin. Goblin walked towards Spider-Man before kicking his face into the ground. Parker tried to get up before he got stabbed by Green Goblin, who picked him up by his back, smashing him to the ground. Peter's vision went blurry, and he could see Norman taking out a pumpkin bomb. He was ready to finish the job before Spider-Man kick-flipped up, screaming at Green Goblin's face, crushing his hands. The symbiote screamed in pain. Peter's raw spider powers crushed Norman's hands. He dropped the bomb before the two tried to run. A massive blast could be heard outside of the warehouse, where MJ and Harry ran. They saw Peter, who towered over Green Goblin. The symbiote screamed. Flames were on Norman's suit. The power was leaving him as Peter picked up Norman, punching him again and again. Blood spilled down his face. Spider-Man was ready to kill him before he looked in the distance to see MJ along with Harry, who stood still as the fight happened. Peter said Harry. He looked at his hands with blood everywhere. Before Norman yelled, "Godspeed, Spider-Man," Peter jumped, dodging the glider before Norman hit back. Screaming in pain, the symbiote healed Norman. His face turned completely into a symbiote, ripping the glider into half. Norman yelled, saying that he was a god. Parker saw a pumpkin bomb that had fallen out of the glider when Norman broke the rest of it. Parker told MJ and Harry to run before he used his webs. Peter grabbed the bomb, looking into Norman's eyes, telling him that he would never be a god, before blowing up the entire warehouse. Harry cried while he held MJ, who both stood still in the rain. The police investigated. They told the news that Spider-Man and Green Goblin had been killed while they fought each other at the warehouse. They said that the cause of death was a bomb, and Harry held a funeral for Peter Parker and his Aunt May, but didn't show up to his father's funeral because in this universe, he knew his dad was the Green Goblin. Harry Osborn continued to date MJ while becoming the new owner of Oscorp. While the funeral was happening at the same time at the warehouse where the fight took place, a hand broke free from the debris. Well, that is going to be it for this What If Green Goblin had the symbiote in Spider-Man 2002. What did you think of this story? While there was a lot of deaths, I think the symbiote goblin would be insane. Learning the truth of Peter would fuel his rage in targets like killing Aunt May and blowing up the Bugle. I think having a symbiote Green Goblin could have been really awesome, and the raw power of not only the Goblin serum, but with the symbiote, it would have been insane. Peter would have had a hard time keeping up with the fight, and that's why his only way out was to use the pumpkin bomb as his last resort. If you guys want to see more videos like this one, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn your notifications on, so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content. But anyways, as always guys, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next Marvel's What If. Peace out.